Hello, Happiness Abounder, and welcome back. So, as we continue our discussion all about the 5 things to a happier romantic relationship this week, I want to talk about the third thing. And again, I know it's been pretty obvious what these 5 things are to date. We've had respect, we've had trust, and today I want to continue that trend by talking about honesty. But again, not in your traditional sense. I want to talk about honesty more so with yourself. Honesty about how you're feeling, about your fears, about your expectations in the relationship. I have kind of a funny story about assumed expectations and a lack of honesty with myself and how that impacted my own relationship here pretty recently. So, while I don't condone the behavior that I'm going to say that I did, I do think that it does show a pretty good example of honesty with yourself. So, here goes. I recently had the opportunity to speak at a retreat, and it was awesome. It was a great retreat. And obviously, that's part of my business for Happiness Abound. If you're not aware, the podcast is also attached to a business where I do classes, I do speaking, and I do mentoring. So, I have money in my business account, which my husband has nothing to do with. And frankly, I have nothing to do with his business accounts. And that's always worked for us. It's all great. Well, I decided I was going to pay and go to this retreat, but I was also going to speak at it. And I didn't tell him about it because I had this weird expectation and this weird thought that he would not be okay with it for whatever reason. And what's crazy about it is my husband is literally the most supportive person when it comes to the work I do here on the podcast and with Happiness Abound, which honestly is life-changing, amazing work, and I'm so honored to be the one to do it. And he's honored for me to be the one to do it too. And so he's always been nothing but supportive. And there's a whole story about how I got my life coaching certification, and a lot of that was spurred on by him and being like, why aren't you doing this? Like, you need to go do this. And it was just great. So, well, this isn't that story, but he's always been really supportive. But for whatever reason, I was like, I'm gonna do this retreat, but I'm not gonna tell him. He's gonna be out of town that weekend, like it's no big deal. I'm not gonna stay the night there, so it's just like I'm gonna drive up, I'll come back, the dogs will be taken care of. I'm just gonna do this retreat, and I'm gonna tell him afterward. Which, if you know me, you know that is not my style. Like, I'm very straightforward. I talk to my husband about everything. So this was the first time in our 7-year marriage, in our 10+ year total relationship for the second time around. We actually dated in high school too. Another fun story about our relationship. But this was like the first time I'd ever not told him about something. And it wasn't anything bad. Like, it was a really cool experience. And in fact, this would be the first time I had spoken at a retreat. And so I was just stoked about it. And I didn't tell him because I wasn't being honest with my own feelings. And in fact, I was projecting them onto him, that I was nervous. And I was nervous about paying to go to retreat and to speak and to connect with these women on a much more intimate level, because it was 3 days for me. It was a 4-day total retreat, but I couldn't take off work. And so it was 3 days for me, and overnight, and connecting. And if you probably don't know this about me, but I can do really well being what I call on and outgoing and friendly and get to know you, but I have to have recovery time. And so being on for 3 days is really hard for me. But it actually was really easy at the retreat. Side note story there too. That said, I'm getting to it, I promise. But I didn't tell him. And then about, I think 2 weeks before this retreat was going to happen, his travel plans fell through. And he's like, what are you doing that weekend? And I'm like, I'm speaking at a retreat. And I'm attending this retreat. And I started bawling, just crying my eyes out. And he's like, what is wrong? And I'm like, I've known about it for a while, and I didn't tell you because I was scared you would be mad at me. And he's like, wait, what? why would I be mad at you? And I was like, I don't know. And I'm just like crying my eyes out. And I realized that I wasn't being honest in my own feelings and my own fears. And instead I projected them onto him. Like I wanted to blame him that I wasn't going to tell him because I was going to do it. And I was just going to prove him wrong that he thought I shouldn't do it. But he never once said that any of that. And he didn't even know about it. And then when I did tell him about it, he was like, can I go? He wanted to go and be supportive and see me speak at this retreat. And by that point, it was too late, and I'd hosed us both over on that part because of my own nervousness and my own scaredness because I wasn't honest with myself. Now, maybe this is just a really random tangent story that you're like, I don't get where you're going with this, Taylor. And I get it, but I want you to think about, has there ever been a time where you've made the assumption or had an expectation of how your spouse, your partner, would behave to certain news? And so you like kind of keep it in the wings, or you're a little, it's not necessarily less than honest, but withholding an information because you think they'll behave a certain way or they'll act a certain way or they won't accept you for a certain thing. I know this is just a very informative podcast about my personal life right now, which they usually are anyways, but I don't really necessarily believe they have like magical powers or anything, but I like crystals. Like I like carrying around rocks. I've been doing it my whole life. And seriously, since like 2. And I was always like nervous to pull out these rocks and be like, oh, this one means I'm gonna have peace today. And this one I love because it's pretty color. And this one's my birthstone. And I was always like kind of nervous to bring that up around him. And he totally didn't care. Like, seriously, guys, I have the best husband. But regardless of how great my husband is or isn't or anything like that, I have found that there's been several times where I have either just kept something to myself or purposefully and consciously made the decision to essentially withhold information from my husband in the case of the retreat, which literally is the only time I've purposefully withheld information. But I mean, I've been nervous about like, oh yeah, here's a crystal and stuff like that when we first got together. But I want you to examine if there's any time like that in your life. And consciously go, have I been honest in giving my partner my full self? Because here's the deal. Like, that retreat happened a month ago. We've been married for 7 years, together for over 10. And I still struggle with this. I still want to like put away my emotions and my fears and my thoughts and my expectations and then blame them on him. Like, it still happens. It happens to me, right? It happens to everybody. So I'm sure there's something like that for you. Because for me, what it was I was nervous about speaking this retreat. I was nervous about being on for the 3 days. I was nervous about the fact I paid to go speak when that's not something I normally have to do. And I was worried I wouldn't get a return on investment or any of these things, like trying to get the business mind and the emotional mind and even the physical, like, okay, how am I going to be able to handle this? Because I was still doing 75 hard at the time. And what would that be like? And how would I eat while I'm there? And I'm not staying the night, and the travel and the driving. Like, my brain was just on overdrive. And instead of wanting to like sift through that, I immediately went to a habit where I'm like, I'm just going to figure it out, but I'm not going to tell my husband about it. I'm just going to let it be. And then afterward, I'll just tell him and prove him wrong. But I wasn't proving him wrong on anything because he had no expectation of me spending the money. It was my money to spend. Had no expectation of me going up there. And he was so supportive and wanted to be helpful. But I wasn't being honest with myself. So, as rambling as this story may have been and a little off what my normal subject matter is, I just want you to think about, like, are there things that you're projecting your fears or your expectations onto your partner? And how is that impacting your ability to have a happier romantic relationship? How is that impacting your ability to really connect with that individual and have them support and love you? And vice versa. It can make all the difference in the world. So I'm going to end with that today. I want you to think about that, and tomorrow we'll talk about it a little bit more as we discuss clear expectations. So that said, think about it. Let me know what you think about it. And above everything else, remember, you are capable of happiness abound.